Hiya folks, welcome back to the channel. So what you're about to witness could be a very bad idea, but we're going to do it anyway. So what we have here is an Nvidia GTX 280 all the way back from 2008, manufactured on a 65 nanometer process, none of this 4 nanometer rubbish. This was up with the best of the cards at its time, and for years it's remained in my loft until recently I stumbled over it while clearing out. I don't know if the card still works, but what I do remember is the last time I used it, years and years ago now, it made an awful noise. The fan would just run at its maximum speed constantly as soon as you put the lightest of loads on it. This is possibly due to dust and maybe dried out thermal paste. So first things first, we're going to rip it to bits, repaste it, clean it up and pray that it still works. After all, this has been up in the loft for years and years now. And we need to talk about its 1 entire gigabyte of VRAM. It's almost comical in today's day and age, but I'm curious to see what it can still run from my Steam library and how many FPS we're going to get, given that we're running it alongside my 5800 X3D, so the CPU should allow this card to run at its maximum. I can't imagine much of a CPU limit there. So this is a DirectX 10 card, so anything DX11 and up will most likely be off the cards. But there are some games we can play and check it out and see how it performs at 1080p. And you've got to remember that in 2008, 1080p was still quite the luxury. In fact, during that time, I think I was running a 1680 by 1050 monitor. It was one of those weird 21-inch widescreens. They were kind of popular for a little while, but it did make it a bit easier on your systems. All right, anyway, fingers and toes crossed. Let's see if this thing can even boot, and if it does, can it run a game or two? And spoiler alert, it works. I honestly was 50-50 as whether this thing would even boot at all. Yeah, that's quite awesome. So we're running Counter-Strike Source here at the moment. You'll have to forgive the whole camera filming the screen thing I've got going on here. Again, sign of the times, this card doesn't have a HDMI output on it. It has 2 DVIs and my capture card just won't play ball with it. So we're resorting to this. But given the overall jankiness of what's going on here, it kind of seems oddly fitting. Now, aside from my mad skills at Counter-Strike Source, check out those frames. The new thermal paste seems to be doing the trick also, with temps relatively under control. It is only a blower style cooler after all. And look at that CPU usage, barely into the double digits. It seems that there's life in the old dog yet. I did try and launch Counter-Strike 2, but as I thought, it moaned about the DirectX version, so that was a no-go. It's not all doom and gloom, though. The original Modern Warfare 2 loaded okay, and look, we're getting fairly respectable performance with frame rates up in the 70s, 80s, 90s. We are getting a few stutters here and there. CPU usage is down in the single digits, and all this is being done within 1 gigabyte of VRAM, which today just seems nuts. And what's also a bit nuts is how not terrible this game looks. I mean, I get that Warzone 3 obviously looks better, but this doesn't look horrifically worse. This isn't that terrible. Okay, moving on to GTA 4. We're not on the lowest settings. We've got things cranked up a bit in terms of the draw distance and things like that. We only do have 1 gigabyte of VRAM to play with, so the game won't actually let you max out everything. It all seems to be fairly okay here while we're in this little apartment building, but as you can see, as soon as we step outside, things start to get a little bit iffy. So we're going to start dropping some settings, and the drop settings have now gotten us into the 40s, but it doesn't feel like a good 40. It feels very stuttery. Something's not quite right. I'm not sure I'd actually want to play it in this state, which is a pity. The CPU's getting a good workout, though. With its usage up into the teens. Steady on. Good job I got that big heatsink, eh? We also do actually need to talk about stability. I've had crashes. Lots and lots of crashes. It took me 2 attempts to get that benchmark run of Call of Duty. GTA 4 crashed on me when I changed the graphic settings. It just freaked out and I got a DX error. And I think I also had a crash in Counter-Strike. I can't put my finger on what's causing it, but it's kind of the whole system just hangs, and then it's almost like the last half a second of audio just plays on repeat, just like really annoyingly looping. I'd love to know what's causing this and maybe find out if I could remedy it, but frankly I haven't got the time to go down that kind of rabbit hole right now. But in short, this card crashes a lot. Moving on to Half-Life 2, and we're getting some impressive numbers. It's worth noting here that with Half-Life 2 and Counter-Strike Source that we saw earlier, I removed the FPS cap that comes as default. So we're seeing the maximum possible performance here from the card. Nice to see the CPU safely back into the single digits of usage though. But again, crashes have plagued us while I did this Half-Life 2 testing. I managed to get a few bits recorded, but it really wasn't good. So leaving the best till last, and we have GTA 5. Now, given that this game came out a few years after GTA 4, I expected it to run a bit worse on the presumption that it would be a more demanding title. So we're running on the normal settings, which is to say, the lowest that it offers. Weirdly, it's just called normal. But it's running really nicely, much better than GTA 4. Again, we're only sort of in the 40s and the 50s, but it feels way, way more playable than GTA 4 did when I tested it. We have had the odd crash or two as well, but when it actually does run, it's pretty good, especially as the game is around, I think, 5 years newer than the GPU we're using. So all in all, a pretty respectable result for GTA 5. Again, 1080p, that's not to be sniffed at, especially on a card with 1 GB of VRAM. So there you have it, folks. Possibly the dumbest video idea I've had on the channel to date. I guess to conclude, yes, you can run a 16-year-old GTX 280 inside of a modern 5800X 3D based rig, but for goodness sake, don't. Anyway, thanks for watching, folks. Let me know in the comments if you had this card back in the day, if it's one that you remember. Leave a like, hit the sub button, all that good YouTube stuff, and until next time, take the very best care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.